even thy salvation, according to thy word, so shall I have wherewith to answer him that reproacheth me. For I trust in thy word, and take not the word of truth utterly out of my mouth. For I have hoped in thy judgments, so shall I keep thy law continually, forever and ever. And I will walk at liberty, for I seek thy precepts. I will speak of thy testimonies, also before kings.
Good morning, welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. We're starting very late today. Heck of a time getting started, but I was resolved not to put off another study. So we are having another study. Regardless. Yeah, I don't know. If I had a coat of arms, better late than never might show up somewhere on that coat of arms. Like as a personal motto. Not exactly a personal motto, one that could be applied to me unflatteringly, unfortunately. So we were on verse 6. The Lord is right, all his works are done in truth. Oh, yeah, sing, play skillfully, all the instrument stuff we talked about. He loves righteousness and judgment. The earth is full of the goodness of God. These are the things God delights in. You know, when I in my prayers to the Lord, it's like when I think of, like when I'm in doubt and I feel, bad about my situation, or maybe apprehensive somewhat of what may come next, or most often I'm not worried about what comes next, but what I should do. How I'm going to get from A to B. That's mostly because I trust the Lord. I'm not worried about what comes, but how to get there, which is probably a step in the right direction. It's still not enough faith for me, for what I think would be right. You know, I should have no trouble. How are we going to get there? I should go about finding that out diligently with no anxiety about it. You know, it's one thing. It's not. You should not just fold your hands and say the Lord will take care of everything, because that's akin to tempting God. When the devil tempted Jesus to throw himself off the temple, there's another side of that coin, which is, because he said, throw yourself down, for it's written, the Lord will give his angels charge over you. They will bear you up in their wings, lest at any time thou dash thy foot against a stone, quoting some psalm. Oh, not some psalm, but, well, it is some psalm. I just don't remember the number. 104? I don't know, something like that. Probably not 104. I don't have them that well cataloged in my mind, so that's one of the psalms. And he quotes that Adam and tells, some people say he changed it a bit. He's quoting from the Septuagint, so I don't know. And it's not important, really, because the thing is, we shouldn't do things that we know would normally destroy us. Conversely, we shouldn't avoid things we know would normally build us up, things that we should do, like having a job or having a business or doing something to be diligently working in the world. There's a certain tempting God sinfulness of thinking, I'm one of God's elect, I will fold my hands and do nothing. We have to do things. We may not always know what to do. But if we seek justice, judgment, righteousness, if we're seeking those things in our heart, then we should have confidence that God is on our side. I mean, my fundamental thought that comforts me is the trust I do have for the Lord, that I trust him completely with my very existence. So, I've got to somehow figure out how to put that into practice, even in smaller things. We already trust him for the salvation of our souls. But the thing is, that always is something that seems esoteric or far off, you know. On one hand, it seems like, well, that your soul is like a ethereal, like, what is that exactly? And, you know, and the things that we would talk about, like, in terms of, like, well, you know, well, I mean, I would talk in terms of death. You will die. But even for humans, that's, you know, people never think, well, people think about death for sure, but they don't, like, you know, when you're going, like, if I was going to die tomorrow, I'm not living my life today like I was going to die tomorrow. You know what I mean? Which, you know, some people would say, well, you should live your life like that. I don't know. I don't know if that's right. You know what I mean? Because if I was going to die tomorrow, I would probably just spend a lot of time with my family. You know? The people I love. I don't think I would be like, I mean, because that's not enough time to do a lot of other things I've wanted to do with my life. Right? But the thing is, it's not like in my life I never spend time with my family. So it's not like I'd be like trying to make up something that I don't do already. It's just, it would be the thing to do if I had one day left to live. So, you know, I can't live my life as if I will die tomorrow. I mean, who does? I've heard people suggest such things. I think it's silly. You can't live like that. You have to live your life one day at a time, yet our vision forward has to be like we have to do some planning for the future. I mean, Jesus talked about things like, you know, take no thought for your lives and all that, but it has to do with anxiety more than it has to do with just normal things. You know, it's like he made plans too. You know, we would go up to Capernaum. We would, you know, they would travel several days' journey. You know, there was things that had to be done. You know, Paul made plans. I will journey to you shortly, you know, if the Lord wills. And we throw that in. If the Lord wills, I will continue all the plans I've made. Personal and business and professional. There's all different things, actually. Business and professional are sometimes the same. Not always. You got a lot of plans, and anyways, I want to get away from what I'm talking about because it's just, let's get into the scriptures themselves here. But just trusting the Lord is so very important. But also, we trust him in a realistic sense. Like, trust him actively in what you do, as opposed to, what I mean is doing the right things and judging things rightly, trying to, you know, at least morally right. And we can look to the Lord for support in such things, because he has no reason to chastise us. And if we're in his will, we should be blessed in the things we do. Unless the, you know, part of it is, you know, I've learned to be in need, you know, and to abound, sort of. I don't know if I've learned to abound. Which to me is like when you have an abundance of everything, you don't even know what to do with it all. I only have an abundance in certain areas, like not monetary, but, you know, I have other abundances. But they're less tangible than money. Money's like, you know, I've got love and a family, you know, all these other things, which are not exactly tradable, but are, some people's lives waste away for lack of them, you know. And here I think it's not a big deal. I don't think it's not a big deal. I actually do very much appreciate the fact that I consider myself one of the wealthiest men in the world. But that's not a financial assessment. It's a personal assessment of like the personal goodness and well-being I get in my life, and that's the Lord's doing. The earth is full of good things from God. We have to we have to do some work to take hold of them. Something. People say, all you gotta do is receive Jesus. That's something. You don't just sit around quietly waiting for the Lord. He knocks and you open. He speaks and you say, here I am. There is a response. It's natural, expected. It's almost not even really written so much because it's like, it's in the scriptures. It's just all over the place, the response. But it's not like when they started talking about faith, they were like, yeah, but of course, if you really believe you're just going to be like a general response of some sort, the proper response to grace. You don't destroy grace by responding to it. Works, earning things by works is one thing. That's not grace. But responding to grace with an appropriately thankful and loyal and whatever other virtue you want to throw in there response is not destructive to grace. I'm not earning it. It's like I'm just doing it's a worthy response. If I have an unworthy response to grace, like God shows me grace and I give him the middle finger and tell him where he can stick his grace. That is an unworthy response. Is grace, and I don't even think that's really like something that happens because, people do definitely, turn away from the gospel and spit on it. Though, that to me is not really like hearing the gospel. The grace and response is in that you hear it, not in that you hear the sound of the words. And, it's like, it's in that you hear it and it truly speaks to you inwardly and you think, and you believe it. That's where grace is. If you shut yourself out, that God isn't helping you. When people like close their ears to the gospel, it's, the Lord has shut their ears. He might as well because he could open them. Make the heart of his people fat, make their ears heavy, shut their eyes lest they see. By the word of the Lord were the heavens made, and all the host of them by the breath of his mouth. That's how God is the creator. And by his word were the heavens made. This is something that, you see in the New Testament. That in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Speaking of the Son of God. He gathereth the waters of the sea together as an heap. He layeth up the depth in storehouses. Let all the earth fear the Lord. Let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe of him. Because, there's, you think about this, we wonder at the world, at the created world. We look up at the stars and we see the multitude of them. I was looking at the stars last night when I got home. It shows you the kind of day I had. I was looking at the stars when I arrived home. And then, you look at them. I've always been interested in the stars. When I was a kid, I used to, I remember I bought with my own money Astronomy magazine. I don't know if that was the name. I think it was just called Astronomy. I don't remember. I only bought one copy once. I remember read it from cover to cover. I liked it. Didn't think of subscribing. And I have a star chart I bought years ago. Like it's a map of the stars. You could probably get the same thing on the internet now, so why bother, right? And it's probably a more reliable tool. Easier to tell what you're looking at than the old star charts like I have. So it's a marvelous world that God has created. We marvel at the stars and the abundance of them, the host of them. There's so many. But then we talk about the waters. And interestingly, stars, waters also have symbolic meanings. I don't think in this context he is using them symbolically. As far as the stars aren't going to be representative or the host of them. And sometimes when he talks about the host of them, I've heard it suggested that he's talking about angelic beings. And I suppose you could speak of angels and such things also in the heavens and the stars and all that. But is he specifically referring to that? Well, I don't know. And the waters. when you've seen the sea, I've never really been on the sea. I've seen it. I've watched it on television. I'm not a big, I don't know. To me, the deep waters of the sea are the content of nightmares. I mean, when I think, I can think of a couple of the nightmares I've had in my life, and they all involved, well, not all, but the ones I'm thinking of. The ones that involved deep water were not positive dreams. Well, there was some hope in them or something, but it's like always like I'm on a little raft and there's like all this really deep black water, and it's kind of ominous. I don't particularly like those dreams. I haven't had a lot of them. It's like I'm thinking of two in particular, but the waters are just the depth of them. When it talks about in the book of Revelation the pit of the abyss, they talk about the underwater. They talk about the abyssal plain. I mean, it is so deep. The way it goes down. I remember seeing pictures of it, and you think about how much water there is, right? He layeth up the depth in storehouses. There's just a tremendous amount of water in the seas. It's such a powerful and fearsome force. The presence of the seas changes the weather, for coastal cities and countries and states and such. The power of it, the evaporation driving weather and stuff and all that. But when you see the sea and the waves roaring, it's like there is a fearsome power to all that, And if you've been out on the sea, which I've only done in my dreams, and it wasn't even the sea, honestly, but it was deep water. And it's similar. And when I think about the sea, that's just you go out on the sea, and there are places, you get out far enough, you look around you, and you'll see nothing but water. Nothing but water. It's like, no wonder for a long time that's where men thought the monsters were, and they were afraid. Go out too far. Because doubtless people had gone out too far and lost at sea. People go out too far and then they never come back. Never find their way home again. Maybe never breathe again because the sea swallowed them up. Death and hell deliver up the dead which were in it, and the sea gave up the dead which were in it. It's interesting, death and hell and the sea. The sea is another grave. And the voice of God commands the seas and the waves. And that's an important thing. And they always show in the Exodus the flood standing upright as a wall, and the children of Israel walking through the corridor of waters, the corridor in the waters, and the depths of the seas to reach freedom and salvation. And there's a truth to that for all of us, that we must go through deep waters to salvation. We have to live a life and go through things. Fearsome things that sometimes are frightening, fearsome. It just depends on your outlook. For some of us, it's not always the same for everybody, of course. But it's like, we all have to go through at least one fearsome thing. Death. We're all going to die unless we should survive to the coming of the Lord. Let all the earth fear the Lord, and let all the inhabitants of the world stand in awe of him. For he spake, and it was done. He commanded, and it stood fast. The earth, let it all fear him. Let all the inhabitants stand in awe. Those are not, awe and fear are not generally, when we say awful, it still holds the meaning of awe better than when we say awesome. Well, awesome we think is like awesome. That's awesome. So that's awful. That's awful. It's the difference between awesome and awful. I guess when you get too much awe, it goes from happiness to holy moly, what's going on? So the fact that one could speak and things be done. I mean, it's the essence of what men call magic, isn't it? That words could act like a spell to move on the world. Not that God uses magic, but God is a form in of itself of Him. There's His power, His innate power as God, which is not tied to anything external. People need to understand that. Like, God does not get His power from somewhere. He is the power. You know what I mean? That's what makes Him God, is because He is that power. You know, the miracles that Jesus worked were worked by the finger of God, by the power of God. And that's what makes things like them seem like magic. Because magic is just a way of a shorthand word for explaining powers we don't understand. You know what I mean? Because, like, you know, there's fictional magic in books and all that. But in the real world, you know, laying aside things like magicians and illusionists, which is fun, and you know, nothing really, there's no power there except you know, there is a certain power there, but it's illusions and tricks and things like that. And like mind reading is, you know, there's a skill to it. The power of God is not so. You know, it's the power. You know, they all look for the unified field theory, the theory of everything that explains all the forces of the universe in terms of each other or in terms of one thing. It brings all the equations together into a single equation for everything. And which I don't even pretend to really understand what that means. I don't. But because I think if anyone really understood what that meant, they'd probably be able to come up with the answer. You know what I mean? But like, to come up with a theory of everything, you'd have to understand what everything is. And if you haven't accounted for everything, you'll never find an equation that accounts for everything. You know what I mean? For example, if like you have your basic forces, you have your, you know, electromagnetism and your gravitation, and there's the weak and strong versions of these different things. And what was the other one? Electromagnetism, gravitation, whatever. You know, these fundamental forces. And then, you know, the forces that hold the molecules together and that cause the things to interact in the way they do. Like I mean, like there's something at work underneath everything. And ultimately, the thing that they don't know is God. God is that power. Like, because I don't really think when people look scientifically at the world, they're actually able to see the substructure. Meaning, the world rests upon, and I think, you know, the scriptures kind of allude to this, and I don't know if they weren't trying to make a scientific point, but I think it's probably true. That that there's a foundation to the world, not a literal literal foundation. I mean, there are foundational principles which are not visible, meaning we can't observe the powers, the structures that represent the foundation of our reality. Like, our reality is built upon a structure that already exists, you know what I mean, that in which this existence is. Because, you know, and they're always trying to get outside the universe. They know that the universe is like this contained thing, and there is at least they think there's some external to it. Something external to it. Other universes, perhaps. or as you know, and I call it, if there are multiple like George Carlin, the comedian, asks us, if there are multiple universes, what do you call the bigger thing that they're all a part of? You know, obviously we misnamed the unit. We named it too early. We called it the universe before we realized that there might be more. That's why in the scriptures it's called the world. This is the world, not a universe. It's just the world. You know, not the planet Earth, the world, the stars, the earth, the seas, the world, things as ordered. That's the word. At least in the New Testament, I know the New Testament word for world means like cosmos, means the world as ordered. In fact, that's why we have the word cosmopolitan or cosmetics. Also comes from cosmos. Cosmopolitan means a citizen of the world. Cosmetics, it means having to do with beauty and order. So God's, by his word, he powers things. That is not meant to be a scientific explanation of how God's power works, by the way. I mean, it's no more than, explaining, like, if you were trying to explain the magic of, like, the Harry Potter world. Some people get bent out of shape about these fictional stories and fantasies, which have nothing to do with real magic or anything, but, because they think it's like some sort of doorway to Satanism or something. Fine. That everyone's entitled to their opinion. But anyways, if you think about the magical world that they create for these things, they say magical words. They'll say like levitate, or whatever. In Latin, usually leve tu pi or whatever. I don't know what they say exactly. I don't remember the words. And so they say some magical word, and then they wave their wand, and little sparks come out, and something happens. So it's not just the word that's doing it. I mean, like, there's some other thing going on that doesn't get explained, like how it works. And that's magic, right? And it probably would seem very ironic and funny to an atheist for me to be explaining God's power in terms of magic, because that's one of the accusations they lay, that like a lot of the religion is about magical thinking. And I understand that, and there's to some degree to which it's true, because it is a power beyond our understanding or reach, but it's not utterly beyond our reach, because I've been touched with God's power. When I received the Holy Spirit, I felt his power come over me. It's unlike anything I've ever experienced before or since. So, and that doesn't, to me, and what people think of that doesn't matter at all, because it's what's got me. It's how he got his hooks into me. He showed me that power, and I was like, for the first time in my life, I'm like, wow. I was like, wow, God, you're really real. I mean, I'd always believed, but I think I could have believed a bit more. And so I did. I did believe it a bit more after that. God can speak and make things. So men ought to be, think about that power. But they just don't believe it, They ought to stand in awe. They ought to, they ought to look around at look at how fragile our existence is. You think about this, the world was chugging along, and then along comes this, what should we call it? This disappointing pandemic, where it was just not quite as apocalyptic as we thought. The worst things are happening about what people are doing to each other over it than what actually happened. The politicization of it is more, and you can be certain things will be politicized when they happen. And now you see, and on some level, you got to make sure you're able to look after yourself and be prepared. Because you imagine, like, okay, what about when the meteor strikes? What's that going to do? How are people going to react to that? When the sun is darkened by a third, and our little planet starts getting bombarded by heavenly things that are not friendly. You know what I mean? And it's inevitable. I mean, you look around the world. I remember I was watching a video yesterday about Mount St. Helens. I forgot why. Oh, because they you know why? It's because they sensationalized all the titles of the videos. And so it was like, this glacier is dangerous or whatever. You know, they state, they don't overstate, but they oversell, not overstate, but oversell often the danger of things in order to make it people more interested. Because like a lot of things, it is very dangerous, but not to very many people. Because, you know, the nature of things. Because it's like a lot of things, it's like, well, you know, my overhead power lines are dangerous. But as long as they stay up there, they're fine. When they come down the ground, now I've got a greater danger. As long now, but I can stay away from them. But if I get close to them, now I'm in more danger. So danger is relative. I mean, there's a lot of dangerous things all over the place. You know, people die in their homes, you know. I remember when I was, you know, when they were talking about all the people dying from COVID-19, I was like, you know how many people died from preventable accidents in the previous years? I had the number memorized for a few weeks, but it was like, I think it was 171,000 or something like that. It's like almost 200,000 people. Half of those are car accidents, but the other ones are like things like falls and stuff. There's lots of danger in everyday places. Peril. But God is the ultimate peril. He is really, you understand, it's like, he is the one, he is why we're alive. So the world is full of his goodness because we're here. But also, he has said that for our sins we shall die. And he has the power to make us live again. You know what I mean? He has the power to make us live, the power to make us die. It's power to bring the world into existence. Power to, you know, just decide to close up shop. The world no more. Thankfully, he keeps his word. He's not going to just snap his fingers and make the world disappear. Or snap his fingers and turn it into a ball of fire. Or snap his fingers and just, well, he might snap his fingers and make things a whole lot worse. Because there is as far as like worse for us. Right now the world is filled with his goodness. Someday it shall be filled with his wrath. You know? And we know what that's going to look like. We can read about in Revelation. The world will be filled with God's wrath. Poured out. There's a cup waiting. You know, I see the world now and its corruption. I still don't think, as I've said for years, that we have come to the place where we are like on the cusp of like, wow, this is the worst the world could get. It's like, as I fight personally against what's going on in our country, it reveals to me, you know, one, it's like, yes, there's a lot of evil intent out there. They want to do evil. They want to do things, they don't think that it's evil. They think they're bringing about paradise. You know? They want to bring about paradise, but in so doing, they're willing to kill any, you know, it's like, that's what always ends up happening. You know, we'll bring about paradise, but we got to kill you first, you know, because you're standing in the way. You want to do things, you don't agree with our plan. The best laid plans of men, well, it's best kept simple. And no man has ever shown himself competent in terms of planning an economy. But they want to bring about even worse things. So the hearts of men are set to do greater evil than they have already. They want to do greater evils. They don't even know it's evil they want to do. Like I said, they want to do good. But they will bring evil instead. And they will bring evil in all their do-gooding. Or good doing. All their do-gooder intentions will not change that fact. You know, remember when in World War II, when they were starting to kill people, they thought it was for the good of the nation. You know, for the good of everybody. Some people are just too evil and intractable. You know, they're incurable. So they have to be eliminated. I mean, that's the mentality. That eventually comes about when people become obsessed with their ideology. They become obsessed with it. They think they can fix everything. And so since they think they can fix everything and make the world better for everyone, at some point there becomes, how dare you stop me from trying? How dare you get in the way of this? If you get in the way of this ultimate good for the most people, that makes you evil. And what does it mean to give the world into the hands of incompetent people who don't know what they're doing? Meaning like if we just allow it, then we are evil. At least as far as we're allowing evil. We're just standing by and letting evil. We can't do that. Can't just stand by and let evil men run amok. That's not acceptable behavior for a Christian. You can't just say nothing. We have to do things. I have to. At least I've been given a mouth. Men ought to fear God. They don't, and that's bad for them. The Lord bringeth the counsel of the heathen to naught. He maketh the devices of the people of none effect. The counsel of the Lord standeth forever, the thoughts of his heart to all generations. The heathen take counsel. The heathen means the nations that know not God. The heathen take counsel. Just like in Psalm 2, the heathen take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed, meaning the king of Israel, David. And he's also thinking of that, of the foreign nations. They take counsel against David, against God's king, against you, against me. If we are God's anointed, if we are Christians, if you're a Christian, you're laying claim to being one of God's anointed, whether you want it or not. Putting your faith in Christ makes you a anointed one. It makes you, at least, genuinely put, I'm not here to judge people. I'm just saying, if you want the most out of your Christian experience, you should be diligent and serious. Take it seriously. Don't be, in the sense of, not just some people take it serious, but it's they get on other people. And they get on people and they're like, you need to listen to God, and they hit them over the head with the Bible in a metaphorical sense. You know what I mean? They use their zeal in a destructive way without even considering this is destructive. You know what I mean? They go around making people mad with the gospel, making people angry. Because of the way they preach it. Or whatever. I don't know. Instead of thinking about it, what am I doing? Is what I'm doing destructive or constructive? Because we can be destructive with our words. The tongue is a fire. It is set on fire of hell. It is a world of iniquity, James says. If you can tame the tongue, you can tame your whole body. It's not easy. God's words, by God's word, the world is held together. And with my word, I can do things. I have power with my words. I can put things together, at least ideas and stuff. And if God gives me the power, I can also say to this mountain, be thou removed and cast in the sea, because I don't need a lot of faith to do that either. Just need to have some faith. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, right? But I can also destroy and tear down and wound with my words. That's why the word of God is a sword, a sharp two-edged sword. Because every sword has two edges. Now, I don't mean that literally. Because I know there are one-sided swords. But a two-edged sword is particularly dangerous because it can cut both ways. What does that mean? Well, I always remember when I learned to use knives when I was young. We would You put like a single-sided blade. You put your thumb on the back of the blade and push, and you have it. It's fine, right? Because there's a flat spot there for your thumb or whatever to give you a little leverage to push on the blade. If you're whittling or whatever, you don't always just use the handle. Sometimes you put your thumb on the blade to make sure the pressure's in the right spot. Certainly, whatever. Now, a two-edged sword can not only can it, it can destroy or build up, so to speak, but it can wound you. Can't put, if you're pointing the blade at someone else, you're also kind of got the edge towards you. It can be self-destructive. Meaning the same word that I use to condemn others can condemn me. If I use the word of God to tell, to say, to explain some moral truth, and it can cut the wicked, it can cut the tender-hearted, people who have a mind, to heed God's word. It can be cutting, in the sense, is it penetrate? I mean in a good sense, but also it can come back on me. It's a dangerous weapon, the word of God. You see people mishandling it all the time. Cutting themselves, cutting the people around them. I'm speaking metaphorically. They're by mishandling the word, they're wounding themselves. And they're also, the people who listen to them are also suffering because of it, because they're not gaining understanding. They're not gaining wisdom. They have a counsel, but it's their counsel. It's another word. They have a word. They have a device. They've put a plan together. Device means like plans and stuff. They've weaved a little web. They've brought together their wise men, and they've come up with a plan. And God brings their counsel to naught. Because they did not, they don't consider the Lord. If all things continue as they are, then we will go in and we will destroy David. We will go in and destroy the people of God. Because we have the power. We've done the calculation. We brought 40,000 men, all bearing swords. We brought 10,000 archers, all marksmen. We have 500 chariots and horses to pull them. We have our siege engines and our weapons of war. We have a plan to take down major cities. But God can stop it all. He can. Does often. But again, if we turn our back, the thing that it is somewhat, as America turns away from God, we draw closer to the worst ideologies man has ever come up with. It's funny to me that, not funny, but it's almost unbelievable that in 2020 we're having to fight off a communist insurrection. It's so small, but it's like, this is what we get for our education system. Like every university should be not bailed out. They should be bankrupted. They've well, not every university, okay, but all the ones that they're like the fact that the Marxism is being taught as a viable alternative to our system or to any, or it's like Marxism is a failed ideology. The fact that people don't know that is the fault of the education system. And the fault, we shouldn't have had an education system. Systems suck. It's like problem, like in the Chicago public schools, they pay some. I'm not talking just during the pandemic. I'm talking about normal. It's normal to have some teachers who don't work because they're such terrible teachers, but they can't be fired because they are part of the union. Can't be fired. So what they do is they spend all day in the teacher's lounge reading a magazine, drawing a paycheck, and they will get a full pension. My only pension is with the Lord. I guess I got Social Security coming. Whatever. So people come up with devices. They want to change things, fix things, break things, come against God's people. I guess I think about like the modern times and what we live in right now, and the fact that there is this like push. It's really actually quite minuscule. I mean, it's bigger than things have been in the past. Like as far as in our country, I mean, as far as like I don't know. I didn't live in those times, so I don't know. They've pushed for communism before, in the 30s, in the 60s. Didn't get pushed in the 90s though. It's hard to push it in the 90s because it was that decade where we watched it fail. We watched it collapse and fall apart. And we watched China, adopt a lot of market reforms, which catapulted them. But they're not communists over there. They're fascists, to tell you the truth. Ooh. But I mean, that's basically communist. There's never been a truly communist country because it's always like, if you know anything about Marxism, it's like you don't just go to communism. You have to go through socialism first. There's a natural evolution of these things. I guess I mention this now because I think about the times we live in and the fact that, people have plans they think are good. At least for them, right? They plot, they plan. God brings it to nothing. But sometimes it's not always so. I mean, but God can bring it to nothing for our sake, which to me is like, it's important because it gives me the confidence to not fear. And whatever happens, we are in the Lord's hands. And, there are a lot of things for which I would be happy to die for. If that's what the Lord requires of me. At some point. I don't know though, because it's like I strongly suspect this whole thing is going to get smashed. So it's going to be defeated and sort of blown away. I surely hope so. And there needs to be a massive electoral rebuke of the idea that America could ever become a communist country. Unfortunately, people are often so distracted by their hatred of the current leadership that they don't see the threat in its proper. I almost think that they're using that as a cover. I mean, they're constantly going through all kinds of hysterics about the president, right? And literally lying about things that are going on to distract us from the fact that the other side has actually lost their minds and is proposing things that are actually insane in their lust for power. And they'll promise anything they think will get them votes. Anything, whatever they think is going to put them into power. And they don't care if they ruin our country as long as they get to preside over it. They're wicked people. I don't think they're all, well, they're well-intentioned people. Because they really think, they're wicked in the way they go about doing this. But they think they're doing it for the best. Some of them I think are just cynical sharks with their mouths open wide, looking to devour nations and men to consume it for their own lust. The counsel of the Lord stands forever. The thoughts of his heart to all generations. God's counsel is useful all the time. You know, like I don't need to wait. I can always be ready. By knowing God's word and his will, his ways, I'm ready in whatever generation I happen to find myself in. You know, and so that his thoughts translate across the generations. His thoughts are not just limited to like, oh, that only works back then. In the old world. In the new world, this stuff doesn't work anymore. I mean, some people would say that. You know, this is in the modern, you know, this is the goat herder's guide to the galaxy. The Bible. I've heard it described as that. It was one of those crass people on TV. But it's funny because I'm certain most of those people have no idea what's in the Bible. You know, it's like it's got records of kings, it got accounts of prophets, and what you read of them, you know, people don't know. They're so ignorant. You know, many Christians are ignorant of what's in the Bible. Just talk to them and you find out. Well, they don't really know what's in there. You know, it's a big book. Parts of it are quite boring. You know, Numbers is not an easy read. It's not a, you know, very, there's a lot of genealogies and stuff. It's hard to get through some of this stuff. Some of the laws are so, you know, arcane. It's like, as far as like having to do with things that no longer really apply to us today. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, and the people whom he hath chosen for his own inheritance. The Lord looketh from heaven. He beholdeth all the sons of men. From the place of his habitation he looketh upon all the inhabitants of the earth. He fashioneth their hearts alike. He considereth all their works. There is no king saved by the multitude of an host. A mighty man is not delivered by much strength. And horse is a vain thing for safety, neither shall he deliver any by his great strength. Behold, the eye of the Lord is upon them that fear him, upon them that hope in his mercy, to deliver their soul from death, and to keep them alive in famine. That's probably where we're going to end up today. And we got a bit more. It's almost done. I just covered a ton of verses, and then it's like 7 minutes. I don't know that I need a lot to talk about all that. Our soul waiteth for the Lord. He is the help and shield. For our heart shall rejoice. He is our help and our shield. For our heart shall rejoice in him, because we have trusted in his holy name. Let thy mercy, O Lord, be upon us according as we hope in thee. Well, maybe we'll cover all this. I don't know. I don't want to give it a short shrift, because blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, and the people whom hath chosen for his own inheritance. Speaking of Israel. But you know, in America, we always had this sense that America was a Christian nation, right? People have said and argued about that for a long time. And then some people say yes, some people say no. And I say, well, it depends on how you define nation. That's a very important part of that statement. You know, if a nation is a set of laws, you know what I mean, a set like the Constitution. You could say, well, no, the Constitution provides for a secular government. And that's true. You know what I mean? But it would be weird to say that the laws of our land aren't Christian. You know what I mean? They're very Christian. The laws, especially at the founding of the country, the laws were very Western Christian laws. And the organization of our government is also from a Christian mindset. And it has a lot to do with it. Because the idea of self-government is predicated upon the idea that one can govern themselves and does not need men to rule over them, but can be guided by God. One nation under God. That was made later, but it's the idea that men are answerable to God and for the most part should be left to their own devices as far as to do what's right. You know what I mean? To follow their conscience as it pertains to right and wrong with the Lord. Except for on those great things we all agree upon, like we don't kill, we don't, there's certain things for laws where if men are not able to govern themselves, we have laws which are designed to punish the wicked who will not, abide by the social contract that we have with each other to live in peace and to, not destroy your neighbor's, peace or take his things or whatever. There's a certain sort of... So America, from its beginning, even the founders said that the Constitution was written for a godly people, and it was not suitable for any other sort. And we began to find out, that may be true. As America becomes less Christian, it becomes less American. It becomes less so. And not that people of other religions cannot adopt the American values and such. They can. But as Christians lose their faith, as people, people without that internal sense of I need to govern myself are not by nature in the proper, mode of being to be a self-governing people. So Christian or not, you have to take on a certain Christian outlook, or if your religion also contains that outlook, you must put that on. It would be true of like a Jew and even of Muslims. They probably can fit in because they have certain moral frameworks. The Muslims is a lot different. I don't know a lot about them, but I've never, they for the most part seem to be able to fit in. People will probably tell me, oh no, Paul, and maybe so. I'm just trying to be generous, okay? I'm just being generous, just to say that I know it's not impossible for someone without faith to adopt the idea of self-control. But you see in the practical example, the practical experiment of the world itself, look out in the world, and as people become less self-controlled, giving themselves over to vile passions, the rampant sexual deviancy of our times, it has stepped up. It still isn't Sodom and Gomorrah level, but it's getting there, right? We're working hard. We want to make sure Sodom gets a run for their money. As you see that people are giving up the self-control morality of their forebears, that, this was kind of like, even in the Greek societies, when people had passions like they were against nature, like if someone was homosexual or something like that, they still might have a family. It's not like you can't go ahead and do that, even if it's not even if you don't have a visceral desire, because it is the norm. It must be hard for such people who, their inner desire is something else. And then to force yourself into that. I understand the difficulty of it, but on the other hand, there's a right and a wrong way of being, And as people give up the control that men once exerted, mostly over themselves. People say society is controlling me. It's like, yeah, well, you're controlling you. There are plenty of people in the past who were not controlled by society. Okay, society couldn't make them do anything they didn't want to do. And of course, it's going to be dangerous, and God knows I'm definitely opposed to all the ways in which people have been persecuted for their for their passions. Let's just say that shouldn't be, but it doesn't make those things right. People shouldn't be persecuted for their unnatural desires, but they also shouldn't be allowed to change the rule book and say that, oh no, these are perfectly acceptable. These are normal. It's not normal. It's not normal. It may be not something that men should cast the first stone over, but it's not normal. And so, and I see this in that, people, as people become more immoral, we see this call for socialism, communism, which is another not take responsibility for your own life type of philosophy. You know what I mean? And so it tells me, as people become more, even though we know that this whole system has been discredited as not workable, and everywhere socialism has been tried, it's eventually been discarded because it doesn't work. It's, and people say, well, we have socialist type stuff in our economy. We have some stuff, but the more socialism you have, the more it drags, And plus, you can't just keep making money up out of nothing. You can't. A lot of people don't understand why. It's because it becomes worthless. If you give someone money for doing nothing, if you give enough people money for doing nothing, that money eventually becomes worth nothing. You know what I mean? Like if they gave everyone in the country $2,000 a month, pretty soon a loaf of bread would cost $2,000 or something like that. Why? Because, for example, strawberry pickers. Let's say they pay them $10 an hour. I have no idea. $10 an hour to pick strawberries. Probably be better to pay them by the strawberry, but okay. Or by the pound or something like that, because hourly work on something like that is not always, the best way to go. Someone's slow, they get paid the same as someone who's fast. And employers like to keep that efficiency, right? Well, let's say you can make a little money every day picking strawberries. But let's say instead you could just do nothing and make almost that much money. Why would you do that? You know what I mean? Now, so there'd be plenty of people who would still do work where they make a lot more money than the free money, right? But that free money would become worthless because people don't work. And plus you'd soon have, what happens is you'd soon have no one willing to pick strawberries because it doesn't pay. And so they'd have to pay more for people to pick strawberries. And that means that strawberries would cost more. You go to the store, I go to my store, when they're on sale, they can be on sale for 99 cents a pound. A nice 1 pound container of strawberries for 99 cents. It's not always like that. They're usually twice that. And then on sale, sometimes they're $1.29, $1.99, something like that, right? Those days will go away, and pretty soon you'll be paying a lot more for it because it's going to cost a lot more to get it. Because to lure people away from doing nothing and to get them to start, being active like that, it's going to require even more money. And so you can see, pretty soon your $1,500 a month or whatever I said, $2,000, is quickly going to be consumed by the necessities of life. And pretty soon it's going to be more like $200 a month. Like it won't be worth nothing. It'll be worth something, but it will be infinitely regressing towards nothing as time goes on. As time goes on, you just keep throwing currency into the system that wasn't created by any sort of work or someone doing something that someone else values. My work has to generate value, otherwise the money isn't worth anything, technically. And at first it'll be worth something, but over time, everything gets more expensive, and nobody wants to do the most menial. Who's going to be a waiter when you can make almost the same money, doing nothing? Who's going to be, all these other low level? Who wants to be a janitor when you can sit at home and make the same money? or even, here's the thing, even if you take a little cut, like, well, I won't, but I'll be free. I can just make some adjustments to my lifestyle so I can live off of this small amount of money. You know, I know people that live off of less than $1,500 a month. They're retired, and, you know, and stuff like that. And they manage. Anyway, I was talking about the nation that departs from God, and I'm over an hour. So I wanted to talk about, yeah, there's a lot of great concepts here I didn't touch on at all. So, because as I was reading it, I was like, oh yeah. So we'll pick it up from verse 13 tomorrow. We'll talk about explain, and it should go pretty quickly. But I just thought, there's no king saved by the multitude of hosts. A mighty man is not delivered by much strength. God is the one that saves. That's why, you know, praise him, put your trust in him, sing to him. Because he's the one who's you know, people pay attention to their plans. People pay attention to their machinations. Oh, I got a plan. I'm going to fix things. I'm going to do this. They pay attention to stuff, but like the one who can really fix things, the one who can truly save us is the Lord. And that's something we should never cease to be mindful of. We'll be back again tomorrow, Lord willing. I really think so.
Even thy salvation, according to thy word, so shall I have wherewith to answer him that reproacheth me. For I trust in thy word, and take not the word of truth utterly out of my mouth. For I have hoped in thy judgments, so shall I keep thy law continually, forever and ever. And I will walk at liberty, for I seek thy precepts. I will speak of thy testimonies, also before kings.